afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the IMAA's Insights and Innovation series for this rainy Monday. Today, we have Acast joining us, one of our new partners. And to kick off their partnership with the IMAA, they're going to run through a whole bunch of different things. We've got Henrik, who's MD, Liam, who's head of sales, and Tom, who is an awesome human being with an even better moustache, I might just add. And they're going to run us through, before I hand over, they're going to run us through kind of where they sit in the marketplace. I want to change them. They've got over 48,000 podcasters in their network, and it's not something they've added onto their business. This is what they do full time. So it's very, very impressive. They consider themselves to be the home of podcasts, which I kind of tend to agree. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Henrik. He'll take the reins and walk you through. Over to you, Matt.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Henrik Isaacson, and I'm the MD here at Acast in Australia and New Zealand. Now, first of all, if you think my accent's a bit strange, you're absolutely right. Born and bred in Sweden and Finland, and then moved to Australia in 2012 to help launch Spotify. I've also just come out of having pneumonia, so if I have a massive coughing fit, please don't judge me. I've been on antibiotics for the last 10 days, but I'm feeling a lot better now. Thank you. We also have Daisy Smith on the call. Daisy is our automation director. She's going to be talking through all things automation in podcasting and what we're doing in that space. But first of all, it's amazing to be here. I was asking Sam before in regards to the IMAA, and you guys have done almost 100 of these sessions, and that's a bit nerve-wracking because we want to make this session obviously super memorable and good and effective, and we want this to be an effective use of your time. We've also heard that there's over 50 agencies that joined the association in the last 12 months, which is absolutely stellar. I think it's fantastic work to all of you guys, and also fantastic work to the industry as a whole. It's so good to see you guys just coming together, and it represents a lot of the values that Acast stand for when it comes to independence, because we really are the home of independent podcasting. In regards to the team today, next slide, please. There's a few of us on the call. Bryce Crosswell down in the right-hand corner. He's up in Cairns, still enjoying the sun, so he's not joining us, but he's our group sales lead down in Melbourne. We actually opened our Melbourne office this morning. So the team are moving into the new Melbourne office this morning at 10 a.m. or they probably just moved in, which is really, really exciting. We've got Teresa Lee, who's one of our two group sales leads in Sydney, and also Kate Digby, myself, Liam, Tom, and Daisy on the call. So this is parts of the team. Thank you so much, Melissa. It's absolutely amazing, and it's also very fortunate to be able to expand in times like these. We work in a very, very in a great position, and we're quite lucky in that sense. There's obviously more Acasts than this. There's 27 of us in Australia all in all. We have 3 people over in New Zealand, and the team is growing. So if you know good sales planners and good account managers, please send them our way. We're desperate for good and capable salespeople. But in essence, what we're looking to take you through today is the landscape of podcasting, what the Acast USP is. There's a lot of noise about podcasting today. The radio networks have obviously done made a lot of noise. Thank you, Liam. And we've obviously got Spotify, who I worked for a long time. And then obviously we got everything else going on in the world. So it's a bit of a mad place at the moment. But really what we want to hone in today on is a bit of research, independent research that we've done. We want to talk through how you guys can use Acast and a couple of case studies to sort of go with that, so you guys can just, basically turn the key and go. In regards to the Acast positioning, next slide, please. We are truly a global business, and we are the biggest. I hate using this analogy, but size does matter in podcasting and especially in advertising. And we are the biggest podcast business in the world. We're active in 14 markets. We have 48,000 podcasts. Sorry, this one is lagging a bit, this slide. And we have 1 billion listens or 1 billion downloads to date, which is absolutely amazing. We launch new ad products virtually almost every month. The latest one off the rank, and sorry if I'm stealing your thunder here, Liam, is conversational targeting. So it allows us to index all the listens and the metadata that's listen to through Acast hosted shows, and then obviously for you guys to use this in your advertising campaign. So that's just one of many that we've done. But I'm gonna shut up, and I'm gonna hand over to Liam Daly and let him take it from here with the team. Thank you so much, guys. It's absolutely amazing to be here.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for that, H. As it says on the slide here, we are Acast, the home of podcasting. Now, as Sam touched on, what does home of podcasting actually mean? The big thing is what we do as a business. We specialize specifically in podcasting. What that means is we basically provide the podcasters and the advertising ecosystem with everything they need to, you know, be able to do it effectively and I guess touch on every service use out there. So the big thing is we are a technology business. So as a podcaster, what they do is they upload their podcast onto our platform. We host it and we distribute it out there. We openly distribute it, which I'll explain a bit more on in a minute. The second thing we do as a business is we help grow the listens of that audience. So as you can see on the slide here, you know, we work with the likes of Osher from Better Than Yesterday, Alexa Fernandez from like a podcast Do You Fucking Mind, Equity Mates Investing, you know, the list goes on. But what we do is we try to speak with these podcast hosts, they distribute that out there, and then we also try to grow that audience, not only within Australia, but also on a global scale. The third thing, it's probably the most important thing for here and speaking to all you guys in the room here today, is it's about making money. It's about providing money back into our podcasters' pocket so they can continue to do what they love. How they make money is mainly off advertising. So that's where our kind of conversations go with you guys. That's where we connect, you know, your brands that you work with, your clients, with these wonderful hosts, these wonderful, amazing, influential hosts out there, and connecting that with their audiences. So Acast, in terms of a landscape snapshot, you know, Acast really commands about 29% of the listens within Australia. So you start comparing that against our very small competitors on that. But what we do is as I said, Acast is the biggest in Australia. We have over 24 million monthly listens each and every month. And when you start to think about it in an audio ecosystem, you know, we know that a lot of podcast listeners aren't listening to commercial radio. They are listening to Spotify, but they are listening on the ad-free side of the business. And then they also are paying for music subscriptions as well. So, you know, podcast listener, yes, we get bundled in that audio landscape, but it's kind of quite hard to reach a podcast listener, and specifically an Acast one. So as I touched on, you know, we really do believe in being a platform agnostic, open distribution. So what that means is wherever you listen to your podcast, you know, wherever you listen to an Acast podcast, you know, we believe in openly distributing that. So when you actually break that down, most listens actually happen within the Apple podcast app, around 65% to 70%. And then about, you know, 15% of our listens happen in Spotify. So if you listen to one of our podcasts, Osher Gunsberg, Better Than Yesterday, in the Spotify app, and you hear an ad, that is an ad served by Acast. No other person can sell an ad within our content. So yeah, as I said, there's a lot of noise about podcast consumption. People can consume podcasts through many different devices out there. But just for you guys and that clarity is when you listen to Acast content, you can only buy into that Acast content when you buy with us. So in terms of our advertising offering, you know, I could speak literally for an hour on this, but don't worry, I won't. Just to break it down for you guys, you know, we really do think of ourselves as a marketplace. You know, it's kind of within that marketplace sits Acast Automated, so our programmatic offering. Within that also sits Acast Creative. I guess that's our way we speak to our podcasters. The podcasters bring your stories to life in a really genuine and authentic way. And then the last element is Acast Intelligence. That's our insights and I guess data arm of our business to provide you with the kind of the data that you need to prove that podcasting works. It's reaching the right audiences, the trends and insights off the back of it. So to kind of run that through a little bit in more detail, we all understand programmatic. Yes, we're doing programmatic in podcast advertising. You know, this is our 30-second ad format. You know, we're fully transparent, brand safe inventory. We're IAB 2.0 certified. We buy programmatic, you know, you understand that on a PMP and PG basis. But when you kind of break it down, what do you exactly buy? I guess as a top line summary, you know, you buy contextual data. You know, you can go into genre targeting. We work with Nielsen as a, you know, audience data provider. We can target off the back of that. And then as Henrik touched on earlier, we've got this very new and exciting product called conversation targeting. And I'll send you over some more detail on that later on. But overall, we all know the benefits of programmatic advertising, reach, efficiency, flexibility, and we can work with you guys that way. This is onto our kind of creative arm. This is where in my point of view, the more exciting part of our ad offering. I really like how a host can take a brief from an advertiser, go away, have a lot of fun with that, bring it to life in a really authentic, engaging, entertaining way, because that's the way that it drives cut through for you, for advertisers. And specifically, that's the way the audience is used to being spoken to by the host. So the way we will talk about this is another form of influencer marketing. Within this kind of product realm, this is our sponsorship. This is our host reads. That goes to 30 to 90 seconds in length. Then we have a product called Sponsorship Plus, which is around 30 seconds. So it's like a cut down version of a sponsorship. Sponsorship Stories is an amazing product we launched last year. Again, think of this as an extended sponsorship host read that goes up for 4 minutes in length. Again, an amazing way to have continued engagement and interaction with an audience for a longer period of time. And then, what we're getting a lot more interested in these days is the branded content outside of things. So branded segment, branded podcasts, branded episodes. This is where we get, super integrated and people can engage with content for up to, 20, 30 minutes in length. It's amazing on that front. So a great example of that is Samsung. So Samsung came to us last year with a really interesting challenge is basically how do they convert people from the iPhone? People love the iOS system. We're fully embedded in it. We're so used to using it. How do we get people to switch to a Samsung phone? So they had these two new phones coming out called the Flip and the Fold. Basically, rule bending style of kind of engagement and innovation within the phone space. So they kind of came to us. They wanted to create a fame piece that basically gets Apple users and Apple iPhone users talking about Samsung. So we basically launched a branded podcast series called Rule Benders, and it was on innovative and engaging Australians that are basically breaking the rules and doing things differently. This was hosted by Alexa Fernandez, which you can see on the picture there. She's the amazing host of one of our most popular podcasts, Do You Fucking Mind? And basically, they kind of created this 6 episode series. It did over 25,000 listens in total. A huge amount of engagement and interaction across our network. It was actually featured in the Apple charts on the Apple podcast app, which was kind of a great guerrilla style of marketing. And when you actually broke it down, it was the most successful branded podcast done in Australia. And it was the most successful branded podcast done by Acast globally. So again, huge success. And then just to finish off, as the kind of the last arm of, I guess, the Acast marketplace was our intelligence arm. So we talked about a lot about being the home of podcasting, and we need to understand that consumption and that engagement better than anyone else out there. So as part of this, Tom will talk on the Sounds Smart series that we've just conducted, which will hopefully give you the insights and understanding of the podcast ecosystem, so you can walk away better informed, but also more confident with investing more in the channel. We understand a huge amount of who's actually listening, where they're listening, how they're listening. And then also when you start to break it down on the content and content trends, there's a huge amount of data and insights we have on that front as well that kind of all encompass our intelligence of our business. But that's, for me, that's again like a super quick snapshot on Acast, who we are. As I said, I could spend another hour, unfortunately, for you guys talking about a lot of this, but I'm conscious of time and I'll pass you on to, I guess, the main part of our presentation.
You bloody beauty. Thanks, Liam. Hello, everyone. My name is Tom, head up our creative and strategy at Acast. I have the absolute pleasure of taking you through our Acast Sounds Smart report. So basically, what we've run you through quickly this morning is just a bit about us, where we sit, and how we could kind of work together in terms of the resources that we have available. But what we want to really take you through now is a bit of research and some insight into what's happening in podcasting from a consumption point of view, but also from a media point of view, how you can best utilize the channel of podcasting. So hang around, let's have some fun, let's talk insights, let's talk research. How good. So what we wanted to do with Sounds Smart, this is the second time that we've done it. We did it Sounds Smart2021. This is Sounds Smart2022. Prizes for anyone who can guess what Sounds Smart will be called next year. But what this really aims to provide for you is to be the comprehensive guide to podcasting in Australia. This isn't just about Acast and Acast listeners. This is about what's happening at an industry level, how people are consuming podcasts generally, how we should be thinking about planning for podcasts when it comes to media. We want you to be able to use this as a resource to kind of arm yourself with the relevant knowledge so you can make decisions. What we'll take you through our key highlights. What you should know is there's a lot more data behind the scenes. So if there's anything in particular that you are discussing at the moment or wanting to know more about, please do reach out, because, yeah, like I said, there's a lot more that we can unpack. But what I hope that you can get out of this is just a greater understanding of podcasting in Australia and how you can approach it. So everyone's favorite slide, the methodology slide. I'm pretty proud of this one. So what we did this year is we had 2,000 respondents, a nationally representative number of podcast listeners in Australia. This is the largest piece of research around podcasting in Australia. Last year we had 1,000, so we've doubled it, because we really want this to be robust. We do want you to have the confidence to use this data and to make your decisions off the back of it. And we did partner with Nielsen to help us provide that kind of certainty. And we're very proud with what we've come up with. And I think you will find this data, if you are a podcast listener or you're familiar with the channel, some of this might be assumed knowledge, but it's going to give you the data and the certainty behind the numbers to be able to take this to your clients and to discuss it internally as well. So there are three highlights, three areas that we're going to touch on today. So the first is all around consumption. What's the state of play of podcast listening in Australia? Why are people listening? Then we're going to touch on engagement, which I think is a really integral part of podcasting and the way brands and advertisers should be thinking about podcasting is how does it play a role when it comes to attention and reaching that engaged consumer. And then the last section is all around ad receptiveness. What are consumers' perceptions of advertising and podcasting? What actions do they take? And I think thinking about what's the kind of impact that we can drive from podcast advertising. So we'll run through these three sections. Again, if there is anything that you want to know more about, we can discuss later as well. If there's one thing I'd like to convey when going through this piece of research is to remember that audio is not a channel. I think what often happens is that podcasting gets bucketed in with radio and music streaming, digital radio as an all-encompassing channel. But I think the thing to recognize, and especially when you're planning for a campaign, is understanding where podcasting fits, because it's not the same as radio, it's not the same as music streaming. And what this research kind of highlights is where podcasting can play its strongest role, what its benefits are, and what are its key attributes. Because podcasting is different. It is a different consumption behavior, and it does offer different elements when thinking about campaigns. So as we go through this, you'll kind of see, we're clearly highlighting the role of podcasting, but also differentiating it in a sense as well, so you can have a better understanding of where it fits for you. All righty, consumption. Section number 1, we are listening more. How good. The big picture. So over a third of Australians are listening to podcasts, which is fantastic. And we've seen that growth over the last several years. Australia as a country is one of the leading podcast consumers globally. And so we know that consumption continues to grow. From an Acast perspective, really driving the industry when it comes to growth. We've seen 22% year-on-year growth of listeners across our network. And what this is really showing is that more and more people are discovering podcasts, but they're sticking with it as well. We were thinking when COVID happened, there was a big spike in listening. People were discovering content, they had nothing else to do. So podcasting became a new avenue of entertainment or news. Was that going to drop off when everything kind of went back to some sense of normality? Thankfully not. There's been sustained growth, and we're expecting that to continue as well. What does that mean though? Over a third of Australians are listening. When they listen regularly. And this becomes a consistent media for them throughout the week. So 84% of podcast listeners, they listen once a week or more. And this is really important to think about it as a continuous kind of listening cycle. People don't generally just tip their toes in and out of podcasting. They attach themselves to a host, to a series. They listen throughout the week, and I'll touch on kind of where. But we're seeing that sustained growth, which is really important for us at Acast, because it means that we have this long interaction with the consumer, and it gives brands this opportunity to continuously reach consumers through this channel. We also know that people expect to listen more, and they're really kind of attaching themselves. It's becoming part of their media diet, if you want to throw in a wanky buzzword. I think what is really clear about podcasting is it doesn't just sit in one element of people's lives. Traditionally speaking, when we think about media, you have TV owning the home, radio owning the car, out of home owning out of home. But when it comes to podcasting, it's kind of everywhere. It's pervasive across our lives. And it's really important, thinking about consumer journeys, thinking about different ways that we can interact with consumers and different environments to interact with them. We know people when they're out going for a walk or exercising, podcasting has a place. At home, it's a really key area, people winding down, doing chores, cooking, public transport and getting into work. And I don't know how people do this, but some people even manage to listen to podcasts while they work. But I guess the thing to consider here is that you have so many different interactions or opportunities to interact with consumers through podcasts. And it's not just siloed into one area of people's lives. There are so many different ways that you can interact with them. And I think one of the key differentiators, and we're thinking about consumption, is the reasons why people consume podcasts. This isn't a medium that people kind of chuck on in the background or they use to distract themselves. So it's something they genuinely want to engage with, that they learn, it expands their knowledge, they find podcasting mentally engaging, and they consider it as a good use of their time. This is a really positive and purposeful interaction with media. And when you're thinking about reaching an audience that is engaged, that is having that positive experience for a brand, it's quite a unique proposition. And we'll touch on kind of how that comes to life in the next section when we talk about engagement and attention. So to kind of wrap up the general state of play, we know that podcasting is still in growth, but the key thing is that it's a regular consumption medium. So 84% are listening at least once a week or more. We can reach them across so many different environments and different touch points throughout a consumer's life. And if you're planning, thinking about the consumer journey, if you're thinking about different areas that you want to tap into, a consumer podcasting offers you that. And it's purposeful listening. This is content that adds value to people's lives, and it has a positive interaction between the listener and the media. So for a brand to come into that is a really unique opportunity. Engagement, my favorite. How good. So we are really listening. When people listen to podcasts, they are really listening. They're tuning in. This is what they want to engage with. Where this conversation starts, I'm sure many of you have come across the work of Karen Nelson Field. It is the talk of the town, talk of Tinseltown, the attention economy and mental availability. I think this, and we do at Acast, think this is a really important area for podcasting to thrive in, speaking about attention and reaching an engaged listener, because as Karen Nelson Field says, different platforms, they inherently deliver different levels of attention. And for podcasting, that is key, because we know podcasting reaches an actively engaged listener. And so for a brand, this offers so many different opportunities of reaching that engaged listener, not having to shout and try and distract and grab attention. You have a captive audience when you're advertising through podcasts, because we know that it's inherent in the consumption behavior of podcast listeners. And if you are a podcast listener, you can probably relate to this. You know, when I'm listening to a podcast, I'm not talking to anyone. I'm not looking on my phone. If someone distracts me, I throw a tantrum, because when I'm listening, I want to dedicate my attention to the content. And we know that's true for most podcast listeners. And that is a really key point when comparing it to other media. Credit where credit's due. We'll give cinema the points here. You know, they beat us by a few percentage points. But when you're thinking about reaching an immersed and focused consumer, podcasting really stands out. You know, thinking about that first point I made around audio is not a channel. Where does podcasting differentiate? It differentiates when it comes to reaching that engaged listener. You know, it's much more engaging than music streaming, commercial radio. Thinking more broadly about media, it's more engaging than screens. So we know that when you are trying to reach that listener, or you're wanting to have a one-to-one kind of interaction and reach that listener, you know, they have their headphones on, they're listening to the host that they love. This is a way that you can kind of tap into their world without having to do a big broadcast message. It is personal, because people are genuinely wanting to engage with the content. And what does that mean from an executional point of view? It means you don't have to shout. It means you're not fighting for attention, because you have that captive audience. And we know through work with Nielsen that people recall the ads when it's read by a host. And even long form, you think about podcasting as a storytelling medium. People engage with longer form branded content as well. You know, we spoke earlier about our work with Samsung. Our sponsored stories execution allows you for that longer form, more engaging execution. This is a really neat way to reach a listener within the podcast space. We did some work with OMD earlier in the year, and they looked at the different executions you can do in audio, from brand just audio ads up to more deeper integration, and that the execution with the highest positive sentiment was integrating a brand into a show. And this is where podcasting really excels, because you have these hosts that people have connected with, and we as listeners have chosen to engage with, delivering a brand message authentically and in a way that connects with the community. So engagement, we are really listening. The key points that we'd like you to kind of consider is podcasting drives active attention. It's the most engaged audio channel. It is personal. It is that one-to-one listening experience. It is a platform that people go to engage with content that aligns with their passions, their interests, and the hosts that they like. So that immersive and inclusive aspect kind of drives that deeper engagement. And from a brand's point of view, you don't have to shout. This is a platform where you are heard, because you have that captive audience, and when it's delivered authentically by a host, you have that connection that you are tapping into as a brand that's so natural. and really delivers and drives that engagement for you. All right, I think we're going okay for time. This is the last section, ad receptiveness. We actually like the ads. Can you believe it? How good? Let's get into it. I think generally speaking, and you may have experienced this, I certainly have, when I talk to my family about advertising, they go, oh, that's, unless it's a big idea, it's pretty annoying. I see it all the time on the internet. Can you just stop invading my space? The beauty of podcasting is that people have a very positive association with the ads in podcasting. That starts with the fact that there is less clutter and the ads are seen as less intrusive. When you're comparing that across audio channels, consumers don't feel like they are being bombarded by advertising in the space, which is great from a listener perspective, but it's also great from a brand perspective because it means you're not competing constantly against your competitors because there are not too many ads in the space, and that perception comes through from a listener point of view. But where it really comes, into its own is through hosts. Hosts are the bee's knees. How good. When we compared different executions across different mediums, when we're looking at believability, when we're looking at trust, when we're looking at the way and the reasons why we associate with different executions, host reads come on top all the time. It is the number one most believable execution. We trust hosts more than anyone else. And even when you're comparing an audio ad to a host read, people trust the host read more. And that might seem, quite obvious just speaking about it. But again, if you're thinking about a podcast listener, this is someone that's made a choice to listen to these particular hosts. They like the host, they relate to the hosts. When the host talks to them, it feels like they're talking to you personally. So when they are recommending a brand, when they're bringing a brand into that world, it creates this relationship that is so hard to find in other mediums because it is personal to the point before. And we've seen this kind of come to life in many different ways. This is a favorite Acast campaign that we did last year with Belong. We partnered Belong with a podcast of ours called 2 Peas in a Podcast, which is a beautiful podcast. It's hosted by 2 mums, Kate and Mandy, who are both parents of children with disabilities. They started the podcast to be able to talk about their experiences. Have grown into this big family podcast all around inclusivity. And so with Belong, they wanted to champion inclusivity. They wanted to have their new jingle play in the environment. And what we saw off the back of this is a kind of standard podcast campaign. But the 2 Peas community just went nuts for it. Their social pages were going off. Can't believe Belong's partnered with 2 Peas. This is so great. This is such a great partnership. When we played the jingle, people were singing along. They even had their kids, the listeners' kids, record themselves singing the jingle and sending it into the show. And I think what it demonstrates is you create this connection in podcasting. You're bringing your brand into an existing community. And when it's done well, when it's done authentically, you can have this really positive impact for your brand that I think is quite unique in the space, and especially within audio. Kind of to wrap this up and where podcasting can play a role for you. We've spoken about who's consuming, why we're consuming, and driving that engagement. But at the end of the day, we need to prove that it works. And podcasting does drive action across or throughout the funnel, whether it's driving awareness, consideration, action. I firmly believe that the key pillar for podcasting is that influence and driving consideration, but we know that people do consider buying and making a purchase when they hear podcast advertising, and that's really driven by the influence of the hosts. They search to find out more. And one of the key things, and that Belong example is a good example. The Belong example is a good example. That's a good sentence. But people speak to others. You become part of a community. And so when your brand's part of that and associated with a show, associated with a host, you can drive that talkability as well. So ad receptiveness, we actually like the ads. Podcast advertising, it is less intrusive. There is less clutter. The hosts, they bring your brand into a community, which is, it can have such a positive impact, and it is the most responsive audio channel. To wrap up Sounds Smart, thank you for sticking with me. I know I've said a lot of words, but it is a unique audio channel. And so when you're thinking about planning for audio, I hope that Sounds Smart, and if there's any other questions, again, please reach out. But to understand where podcasting can play a role and the impact that it can have. It is immersive and engaging, and that's so key when thinking about reaching that listener, with their headphones on, doing their own thing. What a great opportunity, and it has a positive advertising experience. Yes, we all, can talk about how lovely podcasting is and the connections that we can create, but it does drive action for brands as well. So that is Sounds Smart 2022. I'm just going to hand back to Liam to wrap it up.
Yeah, just quickly to jump in here. We're working, this is, I guess, our official launch into kind of IMAA, and we're very thankful to be selected as a partner, and as Henrik touched on earlier. But, for you guys too, we want to have a bit of fun with the IMAA agencies. We actually did this as a team where we kind of jumped into a studio in our office and did like a bit of a podcast trailer recording session. As you can tell, my voice is probably not a podcast voice, probably not a presentation voice, but somehow I've ended up where I am. But we encourage you guys to kind of, if this kind of sounds interesting, we'd love to get you guys into the office. Just reach out. Let's have a bit of fun around recording a podcast trailer and what that artwork looks like. We could bring some podcasters in as well to kind of, to meet Osher, to meet Alexis. I'm sure you guys would love to do that. And just kind of mainly immerse yourself in podcasting. And the big thing is we're only doing this for IMAA agencies and stuff like that. We already work with, 20, 30 of you, but, we're hoping to work across more agencies going forward. So that's it in terms of thank you for your time.